Story 1. This happened about 10 months ago. I spent a few days with my best friend from college in his hometown. I'll call him Chris for privacy. It was a very small town compared to what I was used to, but Chris showed me around and we went to bars and just hung out and had fun. On my last night there, he mentioned a place he'd wanted to check out for a while, but had no one to go with. It was some abandoned house or town he knew a few miles away in the woods. We explored and traveled all the time in college, so it sounded like a pretty cool idea. Only 30 minutes after we heard about it, we were already walking along the forest path. We still had some sunlight left, but we brought the lamps with us just in case. After about 20 minutes of walking, the path ended and we had to follow a very weak path through the trees. It took another hour before we arrived. We saw one house in the distance, and as we got closer, we saw several more behind it. However, it was not what any of us expected. The houses really didn't look that old. They looked weathered and badly damaged, but they had modern siding and other things that made them look like any other house. Even a small gravel road led from each house. It seemed like maybe they were trying to build a community and something went wrong that forced them to abandon it. However, other people were also there before us, which could be seen from the graffiti on the sides of the houses. Chris and I went to the first house. Looking through the open door, there were weeds growing through the floorboards, but otherwise it was empty. Before we entered, there was a loud crash through the forest. We both jumped and looked down the gravel road where we thought it was coming from. After that, however, the sound was quiet. We had no idea what it was, but when we saw something, we entered the house. There wasn't too much to look at, but what made it so interesting was trying to figure out why someone rejected it. The house looked like it was beautiful before it was abandoned. Walking around the first floor, we went to the second floor. Strangely, it was much darker upstairs, as if the windows weren't letting in any light. The corridor was short, with only 2 doors, and looked like an attic under the roof. We went to the first door and opened it to see another empty room, but were quickly interrupted when we heard something from below. Shuffling footsteps were heard across the lawn towards the house where we were. We were silent, but we were sure that whoever they were must have seen us outside. But why would they try to approach us? They walked to the front door and stopped just before entering. "Hello." We didn't answer. "I just want to talk. It's okay." He sounded older, and almost like he was missing teeth or something and tripped over his words. After that, however, there was complete silence. He didn't say anything else, but we didn't hear him leave either. We waited a few more minutes and still heard nothing before Chris quietly walked down the stairs and looked towards the front door. He turned and looked at me with a pale face. "There's no one there." I quickly went to see for myself, but he wasn't lying. He was nowhere outside the door. We carefully made our way down the stairs and to the door and looked out. There was one set of footprints on the lawn that came from the site of the other houses, but no traces remained. We both noticed this at the same time and ran to the trees, knowing that the guy must be hiding in the house somehow. We left the forest as fast as we could and returned to him. Who this man was and why he wanted to talk to us, we don't know. However, I'm sure if he had found us, we probably wouldn't be here. Story 2. I was driving across the country on some hectic trip. I had to run some errands at my office in Maine and decided that while I was on the road, I would visit friends and family on the East Coast. On the 4th day of driving, I spent most of the day driving through Pennsylvania. There were a lot of cool towns, but most of the driving was through nowhere. To get where I was going, it took me down many side roads that were long, empty one-way highways. Because it was late, it started raining, and we were running out of fuel. I haven't driven past a gas station in a while, so I thought it would be soon. But then again, this route didn't actually go through any cities. I continued through the rain for another 30 minutes, and barely through the fog I could see the gas station sign, and a few moments later it appeared in front of me. It was on the side of the road between the trees and was really small. It only had 2 pumps and a small dealership building behind it. Having no choice, I pulled in and parked, got out and opened my gas tank. But when I took the pump out and put the card in, it didn't work. I dusted off the screen and tried to see what it said, but it didn't say anything. It wasn't even on. Then I went to the only other pump and it was out too. Frustrated, I looked around. It was really hard to find anything in the rain and after sunset. Sure, the place looked old and dated, but so did many other gas stations. However, upon closer inspection, I noticed a small newcomer inside the dealership building. hoping it was an employee who could help me. I stepped out from under the overpass covering the pumps and ran for the door. Moisture covered the entire glass door so I couldn't see inside. All I could see was the light reflected through the glass. I grabbed the handle and it came loose. As soon as I walked in, I knew something was wrong. The store shelves were empty and some had even fallen and the place just looked ruined. However, the light came from somewhere behind and now it was clearly some kind of lamp or similar. Certainly not an ordinary shop light. I was only there for a few seconds and quickly left after seeing everything. I didn't know what was going on there, but I knew it wasn't going to be good, and it certainly wasn't going to help my situation. After leaving the store in the rain, I turned to my car, but there was a person standing next to it. They were completely soaked and just looked around my car and the windows. "Hey, what are you doing?" I shouted as I quickly caught up to them. They looked at me and then moved their gaze behind me. I turned back to look at the building. The front door opened and a man stepped out into the rain. He had long black hair and looked sick. He didn't take time to assess the situation and immediately started running towards me. Another person next to my car had just backed up as I got in, but the man running didn't slow down. He came right up to my door and tried to open it, and as I backed away, a loud metallic screeching vibrated through the car. I hurried back and forth to the road and another half hour passed before the car ran out of gas. Fortunately, I had cell service in the area and was able to get help. But while I was waiting, I looked out of my car and saw a huge line outside the door. It looked like a man ran past it with a knife when I drove away. The police informed me later that evening that the gas station I was at had not been used for at least 10 years. However, nothing more came of it. And what would have happened if I hadn't gotten out in time? One can only theorize.
Story 3. I live in the Midwest, and there are many abandoned places around me. I was in my last year of high school at the time and my friend and I often went to these scary places to have fun. What kids do here was pretty normal. It was Memorial Day weekend, which meant we had 3 days off school, and when the year ended we decided to go explore a place we had been wanting to go to for a while. It was a ghost town called Cairo, which is technically not a full ghost town because a small part is still alive. As far as I know, it was built in the late 1800s and slowly lost its population over almost 50 years due to flooding and racial conflict. Most of the city was completely empty and untouched, left only to decay. After hearing about it and hearing stories from other people who had been there, we were all very interested in seeing it for ourselves. Sunday around 6, my friend Tristan picked up Ryan and I, then we drove 2 hours south to Cairo. Most of the drive was through large farms and fields, and there weren't many towns nearby. When we hit the road through Cairo, it was probably the scariest feeling I've ever had. Far down the road, faint lights could be seen from the houses of some residents, but everything between them was completely black and completely deserted. We parked next to some old brick building that said liquor, and then got out of the car. We all stood there for a while, not really saying anything and just listening. The wind was blowing around and creaking metal and wood all over the buildings, but otherwise it was completely quiet. Ryan led the way and walked along the path as we looked around. To the left of the road were small huts swallowed up by vines and bushes, and to the right a row of old shops. As we headed downtown, one of them caught our eye. A sign sticking out of the brick said Jewel. It appeared to be an old theater, although there was a ticket office near the entrance. We all agreed to check it out, so we took out our flashlights and went in through one of the windows. It must have been very dark inside, and our flashlights were frankly pretty terrible, illuminating only a few feet in the direction we pointed them. The main room was really dusty and smelled awful, like rotting wood or mold. The floor was also covered in debris, but as we looked around, Ryan suddenly told us to stop. Tristan and I immediately stopped moving and talking and just stared at Ryan. He looked like he heard something, so we all stood still and listened to the sounds. After a minute, Ryan broke the silence and said he swore he heard something above us. He said it sounded like footsteps, but Tristan and I didn't hear it and thought it was probably just the building creaking. We looked around some more before entering the only other door that led up the stairs to the second floor. This floor was actually where all the seats were. About 50 chairs led to the balcony where the stage was below. We started to walk in, going down the stairs between the chairs, when a small scream came from behind us, making us all turn around. In the corner, a man stood between a wall and a chair. He looked completely disheveled and homeless and looked directly at us with one hand up. He had a small revolver in his hand and pointed it directly at me. The building was still so quiet that I could literally hear my heart beating in my body before Tristan ran down the stairs, leaving only me and Ryan. We tried to stay calm and told him we were leaving, but he didn't speak or move. We then carefully started walking back to the stairs, and as soon as we were out of sight, we hightailed it out of the theater and back into the car. We drove off and spent the better part of an hour driving in silence as we all absorbed what was happening. I think the guy we saw lived in a commune, but when it fell apart, he probably messed up and had to hide and live in an abandoned building. The situation could have ended in many ways, and it was unlikely that we would all come out unscathed. Since then, we have not tried our luck elsewhere.